Hello again, and welcome to the second part of our Foley Lincourt series. I'm Scott Sullivan. I'll be your host this half hour, and we're talking with Lorna Kreutz. She's the winemaker of Lincourt Estate, where we are now, and also of Foley. So if you watched the previous episode, we talked about the terroir and what made Foley what it is, specializing in Chardonnay and Pinots. And now we're over on the other side of the valley in an area, how would you describe this?
Much warmer, as you can feel.
By the way, this is Lorna. Welcome.
Thanks for having me again.
So there's a new AVA. I'm jumping right in here from last episode, but there's a new AVA, Los Olivos District. Where are you going to fit?
So we're not actually encompassed in the actual AVA, but we are just outside the boundaries of the new AVA, and it's kind of a trend in the industry is that all these more subdivisions of AVA, we had Ballard Canyon that was established last year and Los Olivos this year. So, you know, it's something that you do have to scientifically prove that there is a distinctive profile for your area. So it's, you know, something that's really specific. So if you love wines from Santa Rita Hills, you know that you can go buy a bottle with that appellation on it and find a Pinot Noir or Chardonnay that you really like versus, you know, perhaps a Carneros or a Willamette. You know what kind of fruit profiles you're going to get with each AVA. So that's the value of them. And also you can, if you're selling any fruit, you can usually get a little bit more cost per tonnage if you have a established AVA.
Yeah, so in the old days, Santa Barbara County or Santa Barbara, or you know, generally talking about the greater Santa Ynez Valley, it was very unspecific, and what they found here is in just a short distance, you run into significant changes in terroir. And so I would like to let the audience know more about Lincourt, how it came to be, the history of it, and tell me some of the cool stories about this particular.
Let's talk a little bit about the history of this property. First and foremost, this is Bill Foley's first winery he ever purchased. It was formerly J. Carey Cellars, and when he purchased it in 1996, he named it after his two daughters, Lindsay and Courtney, hence the Lincourt name. That's where that story comes from. And already established here were Sauvignon Blanc vines, which are out front, which were planted in 1973. We are still getting production off of those, and we do make about 1,500 cases of Sauvignon Blanc from those. We also have, and that's referred to as our Almo Pintado vineyard, and that has more of a clay loam profile to it. Up above the tasting room area, we're actually, we have another vineyard called La Cuesta vineyard, and that's where our Cabernet Sauvignon is planted. And it has a little bit more of a kind of a herbaceous profile to that Cabernet Sauvignon. So it is much warmer here. We're about 20 miles east of Santa Rita Hills. It's about a 20-degree difference on average during the day. So the Bordeaux varietals do better over here.
So now it's significantly hotter. Filming from Foley and driving over here just a short while, we've gone up 15 degrees, I would say, at least. And
yeah.
It's definitely noticeable. Does the effect of the ocean, which cools it down at night and gives that great diurnal, do you still get a decent diurnal here?
The diurnal isn't as drastic here as it is in Santa Rita Hills. Santa Rita Hills will get anywhere between 30 to 40 degrees between daytime and nighttime. Much warmer here, maybe a 10 to 20 degree difference at most. We'll tend to have varietals such as Rhone and Bordeaux that do much better here, lower acidity levels, but rounder profile. But if you go even further east of where we are, it gets even warmer, and you will start to see the transition or the expression of the Cabernet Sauvignon grape go from having that green herbaceous profile into a very ripe extracted profile out in AVAs like Happy Canyon. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm listening, and as we're talking about this valley and the different AVAs, the grapes that they're talking about, Syrah, Pinot, Chardonnay, Grenache, obviously Cabernet and Sauvignon Blanc, not to mention some others, but It sounds like all the grapes of France are right here in this little area.
They are, and I think this is why I chose to work in this valley. This is why I chose to start my career here. I think this valley is immense in its diversity as far as what we can grow, the quality of wines that come out of here. I do tend to refer to it more as a little bit of a wild, wild west still. We're still kind of establishing ourselves and becoming more and more highly accoladed, but it's a pretty unique area that you can go from that cool Santa Rita Hills aspect to this warmer profile in a matter of 20 miles and have such a range of really world-class wines that are made.
Fabulous stuff, fabulous stuff. You know, when you come here, it's quite a change. You drive along and when you're in a wine growing area and you see a lot of opulent wine tasting rooms, this and that and the other. When this one has a distinction of its own, it's a rather subdued, very quaint yellow house, and also a windmill in the vineyard, which has become one of the signature items on the label. And I just wanted to know more about that house. How did that house come to be, and what does that mean, or how did it get here?
So, like I said, this property in general has a lot of history. This was originally a dairy farm, and the owners lived in the house that's on the property. It's this very quaint, small, yellow house that is now our tasting room, and it was actually a 1926 Sears kit house. Actually a house that you can order out of a catalog, and still standing and very durable, so pretty good quality, I guess. But when that was transitioned out of a dairy and into planting a vineyard was when Bill Foley came along and he purchased this property and we made it into our tasting room. The windmill is what we've used for the inspiration on our label, and the windmill's out in the Sauvignon Blanc vineyard, and just something to reference the sense of place that we have here. And it is a very kind of quaint, cozy location that a lot of people just kind of come here and feel right at home and enjoy the wines.
Yeah, it's tremendous. It's a great feeling when you come in here. And the wine profile is completely different than the Foley. When you do the lineup here, you find, as we discussed, the Sauvignon Blanc, the Cabernet, and everything. How many different varietals are you growing here?
So we only strictly have the Sauvignon Blanc and the Cabernet Sauvignon planted on this estate property. So we have our Alma Pintado vineyard and the La Cuesta vineyard. The Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir that we put under the Lincourt label do come from Santa Rita Hills. So we're pulling from the two estate vineyards out in Santa Rita Hills, which is our Rancho Santa Rosa East and our Rancho Santa Rosa West property. And the Gruner also comes from our Rancho Santa Rosa West property. We do make a little bit of Syrah here as well, and that comes from the Santa Rita Hills area. So the bulk of our production for Lincourt is still based out of Santa Rita Hills, except for our special blocks of Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Sauvignon. And that's something that we pride ourselves on, being 100% estate. So we have total control from vine to bottle for every wine that we produce. And from a winemaker standpoint, that is something that I cherish. There's always that dichotomy and the balance with the vineyard management and selecting the best blocks, and how are we going to leaf this year, and what do we do for irrigation or fertilizer. So those are all things that come into play, and when you have total control, you can really grow the best quality fruit possible.
And when you're doing this, when you've got the Sauv Blanc, we talked in the other episode briefly about her many, many certifications, accolades, and degrees, from horticulture to agribusiness and then into enology and viticulture. And some of the colleges attended are top-notch, state-of-the-art, colleges for winemaking and the wine business in general. So I'm thinking, here I am, I'm studying. Well, a Cabernet can't be the same as a Pinot. I mean, you can't make this to this. The pH has to be different. Everything has to be slightly different. So how did you tackle two wineries? You're making completely different products with styles and so forth. So
that's a really good question. So the Lincourt, I try to make them more, ready to drink, really approachable wines with not a ton of tannin, and have a little bit more of a mild acidity to them. So they are more approachable early on. And another interesting aspect of that question is we do make Cabernet Sauvignon from this property, but we're primarily a Pinot Noir house. So as far as our fermentation vessels, we have a lot of open-top fermenters. And we do that because Pinot Noir is a very thin-skinned grape, and so we want to do a very gentle extraction process to extract the most flavor and aromatic precursors that we can. Cabernet Sauvignon is a completely different beast. It's a thicker skinned, more tannin, and so you really want to kind of shred those skins and get as much extraction as you can. So even though we have these open top fermenters that are conducive for Pinot Noir, we actually make our Cabernet Sauvignon in those as well, and we just switch from a punch down to a pump over process, but it's definitely still Pinot Noir winemaker making cab, so it tends to be a little bit lighter bodied cab, and I love that. I think it really showcases the sense of place here, and I love that kind of herbal graphite, almost Cabernet Franc profile that comes off of the fruit from this property.
Wow. Yeah, it's tremendous, and the varieties are all delicious. When you come here, it's the same as over there. You get this feeling of friendliness. And I was wondering, how does the work, the people, the staff share? Like, let's say you have some people that are vineyard managers. Or is there a different vineyard manager for this place?
So same vineyard manager. We have an in-house vineyard manager, and we have 4 full-time staff members on our estate vineyards out in Santa Rita Hills. And they will come over here as needed. We do hire a labor contractor for everything from picking to pruning. As far as picking on this particular property, these are very old vines, even though it's a very flat topography that might be conducive to machine harvesting. They're so old. We have a lot of what we call kicker canes up on the vines to kind of bump the fruit production, that those really aren't conducive for machine harvesting. So we do hand pick the fruit, and we do pick at night to make sure that our fruit comes in really nice and cold. It's conducive for the quality and also for the workers that are picking the fruit.
Sure, it's hot.
So, yeah. So
pick at night, that's good.
Yeah, so we do hire out for a little bit of the vineyard, a lot of the vineyard labor, but our vineyard manager is also working with a consultant as well, and our consultant comes down and recommends fertilizer applications or nutrient additions that the vines might be needing.
Cool, that's very good. So now you're sitting over here, and you were just at Foley, and you got to change your mindset because now you got to work on these different grapes. And I just am trying to grasp the diversity and all the things that you go through. We're standing here, and this is a quote-unquote barrel room, but is this an actual aging facility here?
So for a few barrels it is, but we primarily use it for an event center at this stage, but we do ferment a few barrels in here, and then we'll ship them back over to the Foley Estate facility. So this is formerly a dairy, transitioned to a winery long ago, and it's not as conducive to our needs at this point as what we have at the Foley facility, as far as tank storage and barrel room storage and whatnot. So that's why the bulk of our production is stored over there. So, yeah.
Cool. Now, the Cabernet, both the Cabernet and the Sauvignon Blanc, how would you describe one after the other? I mean, do one and let us know what style, what is your stylistic target, or do you do a couple of the Sauvignon Blancs?
No, we just make one Sauvignon Blanc, and it is more of a California styled Sauvignon Blanc, so we do pretty heavy amount of leafing on it so that we get good sun exposure. It ends up being more of a stone fruit profile, 100% stainless steel aged and fermented, and again I do all native ferments, both for primary and secondary on the Lincourt wines, and we do not send them Sauvignon Blanc through malolactic, so we retain that kind of bright acidity, but because of this warm climate over here, we're getting more of that kind of peach and nectarine profile than that gooseberry aspect, which is nice. And then the Cabernet Sauvignon, it translates to this really interesting like I said, graphite, Kalamata olive, kind of herbal tone to it, maybe a hint of cassis. So it's really, really interesting. And I do tend to do a 4-day cold soak on the cab, and then it takes about 7 days for the fermentation to complete. We press off to barrels, and we do typically anywhere between 50 and 60% new oak, and it's a combination of French and American. I find that American oak really pairs with that kind of herbaceous profile really, really nicely.
Great.
Yeah.
And what do we have here? We have wine.
So this is our 2014 Rancho Santa Rosa Pinot Noir. So this is a blend of 8 different clones of Pinot Noir. And this comes off of both estate vineyards out in Santa Rita Hills. And we do about 30% new oak on this, and it's a combination of French and Hungarian oak. And like I said, we're fermenting the open top fermenters. A portion of this, actually the majority of this, is destemmed. I do whole cluster fermentation on some blocks. I found that there are a lot of blocks that don't translate well in whole cluster, and that's just a process of trial and error. This year I'm going to be experimenting more with that because I think it adds a really interesting nuance to the aromatics. But you can get that kind of spiciness of Santa Rita Hills, that kind of black pepper note and everything, but it has a much kind of fruit-forward driven profile than the Foley wines, and kind of more of like a lush juiciness to it.
So exactly, I'm getting the vibrancy out of this. The fruit is tremendous. I can't wait. When we're done shooting, we get to go and taste actually more of this wine.
Yep, you do. In the 2015, you get a little preview to that. So, and also the Hungarian oak that's in here accents it and kind of gives it like a little bit of a clove note to it. So that black pepper and clove pair really well together.
So that's why you use it as a different spice palette, or
exactly. It's kind of cliche to say, but it's very true that the barrels are essentially a winemaker's spice rack. So you can choose different forests within France. You can choose different regions, say Hungary or France or American oak. So you have quite a range of different aspects. And then you have a range of different toast levels as well, and all impact the wine tremendously. So it's a fun thing to kind of trial new barrels every year. It's really fun to do a blind tasting, what we call a cooperage tasting. We've done this in the past where we've actually invited other wineries to come and taste barrel samples blind, and barrels that you think that you adored and absolutely loved and would never turn your back on. You taste in a blind tasting, and we put them on more than one lot of wine, and you score them the lowest, your palate's really telling you something. So maybe it was, you had a good experience when you went to visit that cooperage that was drawing that decision, but it really is the power of the blind tasting that makes my final decisions. So, and I think everyone should taste blind. I encourage even consumers to just go buy bottles, buy that 98-point bottle and buy the $20 bottle and put them side by side and see what your palate really speaks and tells you to prefer.
Yeah, because none of us prefer the same thing when you go through them all. So I'm getting this. This is bright, like you said. You can tell it's a hot weather or warm weather Cabernet. It's light, nice fruit, great spice. So these styles are all here, but I'm thinking of young and I'm thinking of summertime. When I look at the Sauv Blanc vineyard outside, the trunks are immense, they're big. And so how would are all of them that old?
The Sauvignon Blanc that's planted out front is about 33 years old, and so that's where you see those large trunks. And eventually over time you will start to lose production on the vine, so we are kind of nearing the point where we really should consider replanting for just viability and how much tonnage we're getting off the vineyard. But it's more of a historical reference for us and really a sense of place. So that's why they're still out here today. So. But
you get to taste them.
Yeah.
So if you taste a young vine, say 5 or 10 years old,
different.
How is it different?
So I can speak to this more in Pinot than necessarily Sauv Blanc. So we have some very young vines out in Santa Rita Hills, and they tend to ripen earlier. They tend to be not as tannic in structure, and personally I found a little bit larger berries. You'll have this phenomenon out in Santa Rita Hills where we get what we call chicks and hens, and on a cluster. And so hens are those larger berries, chicks are those small berries without seeds, so it really increases that skin to juice ratio where we can get this really intense color extraction into our Pinot Noirs. I find less of that in younger vines, and like I said, the younger vines I usually pick earlier. They ripen much more rapidly, and there's something with age that develops complexity and nuance. I think it's the same thing with a human being. Sure. More life experience, more weathered, usually makes a more interesting person, and I think more interesting fruit and ultimately more interesting wine. So. Yeah.
So you never separate the old from the new, like you said, you just do the one.
For the Sauvignon Blanc, I don't. For the Pinots and Chardonnays, we definitely do, because there's definitively a difference in ripening stage and when we would pick those. So out here, I actually like the diversity, because at the younger stuff, I might get a little bit of riper profile. On the older, that have more kicker canes, then I would, kind of get maybe a hint of gooseberry. So when you put those together, they really make a nice combination. So
very cool, kind of like different clone or a blend.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like a little field blend. Very cool. Yeah.
Well, it's really nice to talk about the property. It's really nice to be standing in here. But if we can, we'd like to move over near the tasting room and talk for a little bit. So if you want to stay tuned, we'll be back in just a few minutes. Thank you. So here I am, and this is the yellow house I was talking about. Fantastic property. The vistas are amazing, and even more amazing is the wine. So Lorna, what am I drinking?
So this is our 2013 Courtney Chardonnay, named after Bill's daughter Courtney. Chardonnay is a blend of 3 different clones of Chardonnay. It's clone 4, 96, and 76. 100% Santa Rita Hills fruit from our estate vineyards, Rancho Santa Rosa. And we do about 30% new oak on this. When we pick this fruit, we are hand harvesting in the early morning hours. The fruit's nice and cold, gets immediately pressed off, and the juice is drained to a tank where it's settled for about 24 hours. And then we go down to barrel, and we'll actually ferment in barrel. So you can taste that nice toastiness to it. Gets a nice delicate extraction of that oak. It's aged and fermented 100% in oak. And like I said, about 30% of it is new. So it's a combination of French and American. And we do 100% secondary on this as well. So we do finished malolactic fermentation. So you'll get that little creamy kind of diacetyl finish on the back end of this wine. But you get that pretty kind of honeysuckle profile as well, which comes in
fabulous. And the oak is understated, but it's got a lot going on. So there's more than one? You were talking something earlier. We chatted a little bit, and she uses a hybrid barrel. What's that?
So this is a hybrid barrel. It's a combination of French and American. So the body of the barrel is American and the heads of the barrel are French. So it's really the best of both worlds. So American oak can tend to have a slightly obnoxious profile, in my opinion, almost a sunscreen aspect. It gets this kind of coconutty profile to it. So I like to use a minimal amount of it, and these hybrid barrels really are the perfect blend of both worlds. Get that vanilla from the French oak and then the coconut, but not overwhelming from the American oak. And we do batonnage every 2 weeks on this wine, so that's where we're actually physically hand stirring each barrel. So you can imagine that's a lot of sore shoulders stirring barrels, so very much handcrafted, and that helps kind of build the mouthfeel of the wine, helps break down those lees, releasing those manoproteins, which create that kind of soft, creamy mouthfeel.
It is. It's mellow, it's got a lot going on, and it's delicious. Like much of the wine in this property and from the show before in Foley, quite a diversity of products, but across the board balanced, delicious, flavorful, and like I said, over here in Lincourt, some of the wines they're producing or making here, and you can try at the tasting room, very good for summer. So the heat, you have these wines. Maybe a little bigger occasion, you go for some of the big Chardonnays and some of the big Pinots, but it's all good here at Foley and Lincourt.
And you can see that nice bright acidity is still retained in this wine as well, in that profile, but there's still that oak component. So it's not that big over oaked buttery Chardonnay. No. It's kind of a balance between a very austere style and a riper style. So kind of the best of both worlds, and great for drinking on a nice Friday afternoon.
So now the only question is where she sits back and relaxes and drinks, because she's got several properties. I hope you enjoyed the show. For any other shows, you can definitely go online. They're all stream, and you go to prescottmedia.com. I'd like to thank the producer, of course, who makes it all happen, and also co-interviewer and key grip, if you will, Dan Strauss and Jim Liberty. If you guys want to come, get into the shot. Can't convince them. Come on, Dan, come on. So like I said, this is a must-see. I mean, you really got to be able to come here, and this is one of the stops you should make. But if you compare the different styles from the two places, it's quite significant. In such a short area, you've got such a variety. So again, hope to see you online. Streaming live on prescottmedia.com. Lorna, you're tremendous.
Oh, thank you.
It's all going up for you. I'm envious.
Thank you.
So thank you for your time, a lot of time. Thank you for your courtesy. And
it's a fun journey.
The whole family here is wonderful. And you might want to come up and sit down here. If not, we'll see you down the road.
Cheers.